Let's stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Honorable Mayor Ron Shaver,
Here.
Councilmember Dan Marlar,
Here.
Christine Casto,
Here.
Allison Howe,
Here.
Clint Anderson,
Here.
Lisa Northrup,
Here.
Kevin Lindell.
Here. First on our agenda is a presentation and possible action approving a request to rename the DAR Park in honor of Kate Baker Clatworthy and accepting the proposed donation of 2 memorial benches for the park. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a resolution that came about. The city was approached by Betsy Porter, who is the leader of the local DAR chapter. And this park is a small plot adjacent to the larger old Fort Park where the skate park and tennis courts are. And it's kind of separate. It's kind of just juts out. And there's a monument in that small park that was dedicated by the DAR chapter in 1912. They would like to, it was originally the plan to have the DAR donate a couple of memorial benches, which would be in addition to the park, and then they asked if they could rename the park after Kate Baker Clatworthy. You probably recognize both of those names, very prominent citizen from the early days of Fort Morgan and also one of the original regents of the DAR chapter. So her family has given their blessing to the renaming, and they have a little more than half, I believe, of the money needed for the benches, and would like us to approve renaming the park Kate Baker Clatworthy DAR Memorial Park, and also accept the donation if they are able to fulfill that.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Or none, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution approving the request to rename DAR Park in honor of Kate Baker Clatworthy. Second.
I have a resolution by Christine Casto and a second by Lisa Northrup. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously. And I might just add, Betsy had intended to come to this meeting, but since this was placed on the agenda, she was urgently requested to attend the Angels Among Us banquet tonight. So I think she was obliged.
Next, we have a presentation and possible action renaming the police department training room for in memory of the officers killed in line of duty. Chief Schultz.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Police Department would like to receive permission to rename our training room after 2 fallen police officers. This special recognition is to honor Marshal Charles Iser and Officer Fred Raymer, our 2 law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty protecting our community several years ago. The proposed name for our training room would be the Iser-Raymer Memorial Training Room. We'd make an appropriate sign and put it above the doorway to the training room. I've attached a memo in your packet about these 2 cases. I'll just read about them quickly. Marshal Charles Iser was killed in the line of duty on September 30th, 1916, during the investigation of a supply of illegal alcohol. Responding to a tip, Marshal Iser had confronted 2 suspects and requested to search their rooms. They claimed they did not have a key, and Marshal Iser let them go. Later that same day, Marshal Iser again confronted the 2 suspects, and when he attempted to search the 2 men, a gunfight erupted. Marshal Iser was fatally shot through the heart. Big John Swan was later convicted of the murder. On April 30th, 1917, he escaped from the county jail. He was never seen again. Officer Fred Raymer died in the line of duty on December 18th, 1982. He was responding to a call where a deadly weapon was reportedly being used in an assault. Officer Raymer was driving his patrol car to the scene with overhead lights and siren activated. When he attempted to pass a vehicle on the left, the vehicle unexpectedly turned into Officer Raymer's path. The vehicles collided, and Officer Raymer's patrol vehicle was forced off the roadway and into a tree, resulting in Officer Raymer's death. We would like to honor both officers in perpetuity by renaming the police training room in their honor.
It's a nice gesture. Would entertain a resolution if there are no questions or comments.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution renaming the Police Department Training Room in memory of officers killed in the line of duty, Marshal Charles Iser and Officer Fred Raymer.
Second.
I have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Dan Marlar. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. We will try to have a appropriate ceremony inviting the family members of the two officers that we can locate when we dedicate the room. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. Great.
Next, we have a presentation regarding a Project of the Year award received by the City of Fort Morgan from the Nebraska Municipal Power Pool. NMPP is so much easier.
Once you say it once, you can just start using NMPP forever.
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to hit on a few things. The NMPP pool that we belong to is actually not only all of the electrical customers that we refer to as MEAN, but it's also all of the other gas-related communities that belong to the pool. And so every year, agencies can put in nominations for projects, and they have different service awards and things that they do at their annual meeting. So me and Jeff attended the annual meeting, which was in lovely South Sioux City, Nebraska. And if you don't know where that is, just imagine driving as far across Nebraska without leaving the state, and that's where you'll end up. So, nice little community. It was actually on the edge of Iowa and Nebraska and South Dakota, right at that point, and that was where their annual meeting was at. It's one of their member communities, and so that's why they chose to have their annual meeting there. So we were lucky enough to win their Project of the Year. We've got a few slides, and I'll let Doug explain the project in general. I did want to express a few comments about the overall scope of this. This is a project that actually started before I think I was actually employed with the city. This was a project that took several years to get done and accomplished. Brad Curtis was also involved with it from the CDOT side of it for many years. We had a financial, obligation in this project, and then all the electrical side of it and everything. So I'll start the pictures, and I'll let Doug kind of explain what we did and why we kind of thought this was a project that was worth nominating.
You want the short version, JB? This project, I think we started actual work on this project in 2016, 15, later than that. But anyway, so we had a bunch of traffic signals that were old, and it looked really bad. So it was a cost-sharing construction project with CDOT. So we took all the overhead main feeder lines, and we dropped them in underground back to the east, probably 3/4 of a mile. Put that in all underground and cleared that intersection for them. Along with that project, we put in new electric conduit and another fiber conduit in there. Imagine that. Extra conduit to get our fiber to our substation. So it all worked well. We have the lights now, and that intersection, as you can tell, is just really clean and nice. Not a bunch of poles and ugly wires.
I think one of the bigger things that had to occur with this was the number of jurisdictions that were involved in this project. Because not only were you looking at City of Fort Morgan, but you were looking at Colorado Department of Transportation, with it being one of their highways. There was also work done for our current telecommunications companies with getting some of their stuff off the poles and underground. And so there was a lot of parties involved with getting this. And once they get the rest of the paving done over the next month or two, it'll really clean that intersection up and kind of finish the work that these guys started by getting those lines underground.
Actually, Jeff, you helped us stake this line that day, so we did.
Yeah.
We did all the staking and engineering in-house. We didn't go out and have it engineered. We grabbed Jeff, give him a hammer and some stakes, put him to work.
That's dangerous.
And it turned out all right.
Yeah, it turned out great.
We won an award. It's an award-winning job.
So at this point, we would just like to present the mayor with the plaque that we won at the annual meeting. And definitely thank the council for everything that they do.
Good job, Doug.
Thank you.
You guys do a phenomenal job, and you run a tight ship.
Appreciate that.
Then one
Brad.
last little thing we just wanted to throw out today for those of you that follow the city of Fort Morgan on Facebook. Today is National Lineman Appreciation Day, and so this seemed like a good, shameless plug for thanking the linemen that we have here and everything that they do for the city of Fort Morgan. So
Thanks, Brent.
pass
Is that
it along
enough?
to you guys, and thank you for what you do.
Is that an official hashtag?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Minus the spaces?
Yeah, mine.
Brent, was there an additional presentation along with
Yes,
that?
it's next on
next on.
the agenda.
Next, we have part 2, which is the monetary award they received from NMPP.
Yeah, as the awards that they present, the organization has decided that they would put some money behind that award, so it's just not just the plaque. But they do request that some type of nonprofit or other agency be identified as the recipient of those funds once you win the prize. And so the last couple months, Doug's been working on a project with the community college here, and something that I've been supporting him with and everything. I will let him explain what that project is and why it seemed appropriate to donate the $200 to Morgan Community College.
So the project, George approached me here a few months ago, and he wanted to start a lineman's program at the college. So along with REA and us, we got a criteria set up or curriculum set up for a lineman's program. So I thought, what better way to start the program is with the donations.
All right.
George? I'd like to present with this check for your lineman's certification at the college. Great.
Thank you very much. We'll let you.
Well, first I started a program with Industrial Electrical, and then DORA, Department of Regulatory and Workforce, asked for a lineman program around the Northeast Corridor. So that's when I got a hold of Doug and tried to get one going, and put one together, and now it's at Curriculum Committee waiting for approval. We start the first class in the fall, so this money will be helpful for the students and for the equipment. So it'll be a great program for the community as well. So thank you.
I'd like to say good evening. My name is Kurt Freed. I'm the new president at Morgan Community College, just on the job 2 days, brand new to the community, and
Welcome.
find it a very welcoming and warm community to enter. I want to say thank you so much for the donation. It means a lot that the city thinks of Morgan Community College as a place to give those kinds of investments, and they're obviously important investments for the future of the students as well as the program. So thank you. It's nice to meet you all.
You too. Welcome.
Welcome. Very good.
Thank you, guys.
Give you guys a kudos, Doug.
Will do. Thank you.
Well deserved. Thanks for your help in it, Brad. Next, we have presentation and possible action authorizing the mayor to sign the cooperative agreement with Viera Wireless for our fiber optic conduit installation. Brent?
a couple of months ago, I'm trying to think now how long ago it was, I came in and asked you if we could enter into a cooperative agreement with Viero on a stretch of fiber optics line basically running down Riverview Avenue. We can actually now say, and Ron confirmed for me, that that stretch of work is now done. They completed it last night and are just cleaning up a few things, I think, is all they're down to. But it worked very well to have that done. It will be a significant cost savings to the city. It'll also be a significant cost savings to Viero when all the bills are settled up and everything. So that kind of gave us a jump start on our backbone construction for the summer and everything. And when we put together the bid document for the next 14 miles of our backbone, we realized that Viero still had about 12,000 lineal feet of path that they would like to share with us that gets them a whole lot closer to one of their cell towers. And so what I'm here asking tonight is if that's okay to have the mayor go ahead and sign another agreement so we can go ahead and extend that courtesy. This time we'll do it in reverse. Last time we let Viero bid it and then we'll reimburse them, but this time, since we've got the contractor under contract, we'll do it in reverse. Jason has already prepared a draft agreement that we will circulate and get both parties to work out the details and everything. But we wanted to go ahead and do that in lieu of the next agenda item that we'll talk over. So it's been working great. I can't say enough about working with Viero. Ron Christensen is here tonight. He's the one I've been dealing with, and the construction of the project so far has gone very well. And his inspector and our inspector work well together and have, I think, gotten done a lot of work without a lot of hassle. So,
Are there any questions, comments, or Brett?
So the main benefit for citizens is it speeds it up and it saves costs. So that's,
yes.
so as far as any other future like conflicts from the partnership, or has Jason kind of tidied that up, or?
Yeah, the basically once we get it in the ground, their conduits are just laying next to our conduits. They never commingle. They just happen to be in the same borehole. And so everything, once it's installed, is completely separate. Our system is our system. Their system is their system. And then the contract then just spells out all the details of this is what's being, split and how it's being split, and then payment terms and things like that. So.
Okay.
To your point, the only type of conflict we could have in the future is if they go into maintenance their line and they ruin our line, but that could happen regardless of where it's located. Having them co-located in the same area saves a lot of space. Otherwise, they'd have to be separated significantly,
Right.
which narrows the amount of infrastructure that can be placed in the right-of-way. So, that conduits get damaged.
Yeah.
Infrastructure gets damaged from time to time, and we'll deal with those as they happen, I guess.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer the mayor to sign a cooperative agreement with the Viero Wireless for fiber optic conduit installation.
Second?
I was like, where am I going with this?
I have a resolution by Christine Caston, and a second by Allison Howe. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you.
It's kind of nice to have a collaborative effort with local entity, and thanks for what you guys do.
That was a lot quicker than I anticipated.
Yeah.
That's
No,
awesome.
they moved. They were a good company to work with, and that'll lead into our next topic of discussion.
So next topic is possible action on bids for construction services for the backbone phase of the fiber to the home project.
Okay, so we've, over the last several months and even back into last year, we've bought all of the materials that we've needed to complete our backbone. We've obviously started putting conduit in with Viero, and so now we want to go ahead and just do a massive bid to get the remaining 14 miles of ours put in this summer. We went out to bid. We had more than 6 companies show up to the pre-bid meeting, but we had a couple that said they weren't going to submit after they were there. But we did end up receiving 6 bids for the services. As you can see in your memo, they ranged anywhere from 1.3 million down to 828,000. The company that is low bid, Sturgeon Electric, is actually the company that is doing the Viero stuff that we just finished up. And so we've been working with them now for the last, month plus. And I think one of the reasons, my guess is one of the reasons that their bid came in low is that they're now familiar with working with us and our departments, because the corridor that we just put in over there on Riverview is probably one of the most congested corridors to deal with, because we have already so many underground utilities in it. And so I think we just got a really good bid number out of Sturgeon based upon some of this pre-work that they've done under their Viero contract. And so at this point, I don't see any reason not to go ahead and award the bid to Sturgeon Electric and go ahead and let them just kind of stay in town. We'll get the contract worked out under the city's umbrella, and then we'll move forward with them. So I am asking for just a little bit more money than the low bid, and that is so we can go ahead and finish, because we have conduit in the ground with the Viero contract, but we don't have the fiber pulled within that. And so there's still a few things that we need to do in that phase of it to get it all tied in and spliced. And so I wanted a little extra authorization so we could go ahead and have Sturgeon do those other pieces. And so when we're done, we're done with the backbone portion of it that they're bidding. So that's why I'm requesting the $850,000 approval.
So the addition is for pulling the fiber into the conduit?
Yeah, and then there's a couple of different splice conditions that we'll have to meet and everything, so. And this is for the full amount, which includes Viero's portion of it, and so there will be a refunding of Viero's portion of that 12,000 feet once we get that agreement worked out. That'll come back against this, but I obviously need authorization to spend the full amount.
Questions, comments?
It's exciting. So Sturgeon Electric's been really good to work with?
Yeah, they have. Them and their subcontractors have been very professional. When we got started, we had a couple of nicks on some gas lines and everything that just it happens when you pothole, and they were very responsive about getting in there and making sure that it was fixed. When we found different depths, that's the big thing when you're boring. You got to make sure that we're under and over things at proper depths, and they've been really good about, okay, this is what we need to do, this is where we're going to get down to, and that way we're avoiding all conflicts. And they've moved. I mean, they didn't mess around once they got over here and started doing it. And if you drive along that route is clean. They went back through it, and it probably looks better now than it did when they started. So.
Well, and it's good to go with when I looked at this, you've got companies from Arizona, that's, they're in our backyard. I mean, they're really close. And I was really impressed with how well they did not affect the traffic flow, because that could have been a nightmare across there. And while you had to do a little bit of jockeying around there, they weren't out for any further than they absolutely needed to be in the road. And it was really nice seeing that, because it's not the case all the time.
Yeah.
So what kind of timetable are they talking about?
We basically indicated in the bid package that we wanted it done in less than 6 months. And they think that they can get the substantial part of the boring and everything done probably by August, and then clean up August and into September. So their time frame met what we had put into the bid package. So.
If there's no more questions or comments, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution accepting the bid for fiber backbone construction from Sturgeon Electric in an amount not to exceed $850,000.
Second.
A resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Christine Costello, vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Yeah, I'd like to take a second and thank Brent and all the other staff members. They're working really hard. This is a priority of council's, and it takes a lot of people to put this together, but Brent has done a great job in pulling everybody together, make sure we have the technical assistance that we need internally on all the different things, and so far this project has been a huge success, and we expect it to continue to roll out that way. Based upon your recommendation from a couple meetings ago, we're about ready to go out for bid to determine whether a public-private partnership is going to be effective or not, and so we'll be working really hard over the next couple months to vet that part of the process and be ready in next year's budget to continue to move forward. And thanks to Viero, we appreciate the partnership that we have with Viero and their efforts to help us move this forward in our community. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Next, we have a presentation and possible action on an annexation agreement for the Fort Morgan Farms LLC. Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is another partnership that we're working on. This is with Fort Morgan Farms LLC. They're the ones that we had recently purchased the 100 acres from just several weeks ago. As you may recall, in the past, we had worked with them to help annex the property just so it was ready. Without going into the fine details, as you see in the agreement in front of you, it's basically to help expedite things as development occurs, going through annexation, zonings, those kind of things from a regulatory standpoint take time. So in working with Mr. Graves, and looking at this property he owns to go ahead, and the city's offered to go through the process of the annexation and zoning. Additionally, Mr. Linton has a little substation down the corner as well that we would bring into the city limits as well. Just to show the area that's shown on your exhibit. Again, the other part of this, the area that we're discussing is this piece right here, which is just on the west side of West Street, and everything now on the east side, both from the Viridian subdivision has been annexed from Q all the way up to the ditch, as well as the school district. So this is just another area that we're hoping to bring in. He's willing to do that. And then we'll go through, once he has a developer and those kind of things, we'll go through the typical process, but in efforts to kind of take some of these things out, the annexation process that can take their 60 to 90 days, I think helps everybody from an economic standpoint. So we haven't gotten final comments back from Mr. Graves yet, but the agreement is very similar to what we had in the past. But with your approval and attorney review, we would ask that you approve this agreement.
Does anybody have any questions? Or
Do we know the intent or the reason for the annexation?
We don't have plans for it other than just having the property available. It helps to resell, I think, as Mr. Miller would land in his economic development. Having some of these things in and out of the way actually is encouraging to builders that just want to come in and streamline the process. So having it already pre-zoned and pre-annexed cuts a lot of that, and it actually helps on the sale of the property or the development of it. So.
And we're required to provide all the utilities once we annex it. So that's the other marketable piece, is that once we bring it in, we're responsible for providing all the utilities.
okay. There's no other discussion. I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution on the annexation agreement with the Fort Morgan Farms LLC.
Second.
I have a resolution by Christine Costello and a second by Dan Marlar. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next, we have an update on the airport master plan.
So lots of presentations tonight. I'll be kind of brief as I can be, but as you recall, the Fort Morgan master plan hasn't been updated since 2003. It is a federal requirement, especially after significant projects such as the runway. A lot of the work that we're at right now at this second meeting, we had a meeting last week with the advisory committee, and It follows very similar to the comp plan, and they're trying to establish existing conditions and the proposed forecasting so they know how to develop that master plan in the future that's used for grants, long-range planning, and those kind of items. So I'll just go through some of the highlights of where we're at as it exists from a forecasting and some of the findings they've found as far as the airport as it exists today. In the RFP, we want to look at the ultimate runway needs, utility requirements. We've had those discussions off and on right now. The only water is served to Scott Aviation as well as our city building, and then electrics on everyone's own and others. So that's one of the requirements to see if we can actually serve this with more than just a couple units. Land use zoning, working with the county, management procedures on how we're operating the airport, as well as deficiencies that may be in the airfield. We talked about the impact committee. Here we're right kind of in the middle. Here's a quick schedule. We're waiting on some last comments from the committee members, but then the FAA and CDOT will be the next review committee. And then somewhere late July, first part of August, once we have some more pretty pictures of what we'd expect it to be over the next 20 years, we'll have a public workshop and those kind of items that looking for everybody's input and hopefully have it wrapped up in October. Existing conditions, and I think most of you are familiar with it. We went over the airfield. Nav aids is the navigational aids, the lights and all those fun things, aprons, hangars, FBO facility, which is our city building, how we're dealing with fuel, infrastructure, and land use. Some of the big things, this just gives you a bigger perspective of why the Fort Morgan Airport is important. Through the analysis, those that are registered, there's 33 registered aircraft in Fort Morgan, but you can also see there's several other people that utilize that airport that are actually registered in other locations. In addition, brush isn't highlighted on there because they don't necessarily fall under the same federal regulations, the NIPIAS system, so that's why the FAA doesn't necessarily track them to the same level. But this kind of shows you that serviceable boundary that we look at and the growth and why it's important, which fits right into the need of the FAA's requirements. Here's just a quick comparison. When we're looking at Fort Morgan, the one in Akron, which is Colorado Plains, Greeley Weld, Front Range, and then Sterling. A lot of things are comparable. Obviously, the Akron has a much longer runway, as does Greeley Weld, but when you look at how the aircraft is based, if you look at Fort Morgan in comparison with Sterling, they both hold about 30 runways or about the same length, those kind of items. So again, this is a comparison of who, in our terms, are as competitors, but also how they're utilized and what type of aircraft would be flying in and out. One of the big things they found is forecasting. Went through several different ways, both on the ground, FAA, state, all those kind of things. Really, I think very similar to what we see with the city's growth. It's fairly flat, just about a 1 or 2%. They don't project over the next 20 years for that to be much different either from an airport growth standpoint, that it'll still range right around in that 1% growth. The green is the 3 runways that we have. With the new runway, it's complying as far as when we look at winds. There's crosswind runways that we'll talk about in a second that actually are a little bit deficient. But the new runway pretty much can cover almost any type of weather event, the way it's situated and the way it's aligned. One of the interesting things we found is several years ago, we have an AWAS system which tracks the weather. It's just about 5 years old. Prior to that, any analysis was using the weather data that came from Akron. So now we have much more accurate data with the AWAS system that was put in about 5 years ago that we didn't have prior. So that actually helps us again in the development of the airport. This is just talking about the crosswind, unless you want the full details. When we're talking about the crosswinds that come into play, the 826, the one that's in green here, is right here, and actually this 87% is a good thing, because it basically shows the coverage, no matter what wind we have, you can either use this runway or this one at almost a 98% success rate of landing or taking off, which is great. Now, over here, you'll notice this is the one that runs parallel, it's the turf runway that runs parallel to Highway 52. Even though it's got a good percentage, it doesn't help with the crosswind, and as you'll see combined, it's actually a lower rate. So that's one when we start looking at it, is that a runway that we're going to want to continue to keep and maintain. So just as we mentioned, here's some of the deficiencies. Good thing RSNH did their job on the design of the new runway, but it meets all the concerns that we had in the previous. But you can see the other two runways, those that are highlighted in yellow, are deficiencies and things that would have to be corrected as far as safety areas, coverages, which I'll show you in the exhibit, protection zones from the public or surrounding areas. So again, here's the issues we have with the two crosswind runways. When we did the new runway, this area here, when we picked up that additional land, actually gives us those safe zones that we need. Unfortunately, what happens with these two turf runways is we don't have those either through a lease or any agreements or anything like that, so it's subject to having those issues if it gets used more frequently. Those are some of those problems. Additionally, you can see this one running right along 52, that it does stretch out into the highway area, and so those red hatches are not a good thing, but that's why you don't see them on the other runway. So it's not always the asphalt itself, it's those areas of landing and taking off. The other small deficiencies we have is some of our hangars don't have the proper clearance in between each other. So those would have to be looked at even in the long term, as well as this one we're looking at. It starts out as concrete, it goes to the turf runway. We've had issues with that in the past, that people from unfamiliar with the airport will land and they think that's the one that gets them out to the primary one, but then there's not really enough room for them to turn around. So some of the larger jets that get in there kind of get in a little bit of a predicament. So that's one that is a deficiency as well. As far as hangars, we've had lots of talks about that. The tie downs we have in its current state are good. The T hangars, which have multiple planes in one building, and then the box hangars are the individual ones. The projection would show we would need about 9 more down the road. Here's the apron. This was the project that we delayed that was supposed to start this year. As phase 1 is about $450,000. We were going to wait for the master plan, which was a good thing that we did, because we actually found that this apron as it exists right now is deficient in size. The area in blue would be what would have to be added to pick up on those deficiencies that currently exist with the planes that are classified like Caesar Airport. And then administrative minimum standards, we need to work on those. Following rules and regulations are fine. Leasing documents are in great shape. Thank you very much, Jason, for all your hard work, and councils, even us doing them administratively on those typical ones helps expedite the process, and that's all good. And then development guidelines moving forward, as well as working with the county zoning and overlay districts, so that we don't necessarily are required to track those, even though it's not on our property, but it's not to necessarily preclude any development from happening either. So we're working with the county on those efforts. So the next step, we're going to submit this to FFA's tomorrow night for anyone that wants to go to the donkey basketball at 7 o'clock. Sorry. Was that your?
I'll be there. I'll be there.
Okay, I know I got my kid going to it too. So anyway, anyways, and then we'll look at alternatives, and then we'll get into the pretty pictures of what we do down the road, because that's going to help us in our long-term capital budgeting and those kind of items. A little bit similar, separate from what we do now. We have to forecast out 5 or 6 years. And a lot of it's because where you don't get enough money out of the $150,000 we get a year, so we're trading monies with airports to build up a pot to make sure that it works for everybody. That was a pretty quick, hopefully.
Really
Hopefully,
quick.
you've got a gist. If you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Mayor's been involved in there as part of the committee, and we've had a lot of good questions come up as far as the operations, so.
Who uses the, I don't think I turned off, who uses the turf runways? I guess I can't imagine why you would land on a turf runway when you have a perfectly good.
Usually, many don't. It's some of those smaller planes, when you get those heavy winds, that's really their only option to land. And so they're rarely used, especially the bigger planes and things, but some of the smaller ones would use that if they have to land, especially like in some of those emergency situations. But right now, that's one of the issues that we're working on. We're soon to, if it didn't happen this afternoon, one of the capital projects is a reseeding project, is to redo that crosswind one, the 826, and get it all done. Right now, a lot of the pilots complain because the seed didn't really take very well. It's hard to warranty those kind of things, and it's a really rough landing and taking off. And so that's a project that's going to be coming through real soon to just start over with that 5 acres and reseed it so it's consistent and got a good mat on it. Same thing with the other one. Almost no one uses that one that's parallel. And that's one that we'll just see what happens on the results and looking at, is it really worth saving and preserving, those kind of things. But those will be those future steps on making decisions of which direction to go. So yeah, other than that, it's rarely used. That's why the orientation we found, didn't seem quite right with the Akron data, but once we had the AWAS, it's right where it needs to be. And when you have, you only have to meet 95%, and we're obviously around 97, 98 with that new runway, which is awesome.
Just seems silly to land on grass when you can land on a.
That's why it's there.
Good.
Again, cost to put one in, it's additional maintenance, snow removal, all those other kind of things. So because it's so infrequent, it's classified just as a turf one, so mainly for emergencies. So. But it's too short in the deficiencies. It's still too short and doesn't meet the clearances, so it's got its own little issues. And in the master plan, it may determine it needs to go somewhere else or more property or those kind of things.
Land on the big runway.
Right, as much as you can, so.
Thanks.
Cool, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brad. Next, we have this presentation and discussion on budget considerations and possible direction on council priorities for 2018. Mr. Wells.
And go.
I'll
I guess we'll let him pull it up first, and then we'll turn the timer.
I think that's it.
Doesn't matter, he ignores it anyway. Oh,
We went with Q tonight.
happy slide.
So, it's budget season. Believe it or not, this is the official kickoff to starting the budget. And so, what we're going to do tonight is try and speak first. We're going to go through the 2018 budget considerations and priorities that were set at our February retreat. And what I want to talk about and go through is a little bit of an education on where are we going, where can we go, and how will we get there as it relates to revenues. You know, often people look at our budget and they say, you have a lot of money. Why don't you fix all the problems in town? So we're going to talk a little bit about what that money can be used for. So we're going to talk really quick about the comprehensive plan. That's something that we look at to understand what the citizens want. We spend a lot of time and effort to put that together, and that's something that we look at, and we'll go over that quickly. And then I want to talk about budget capabilities and limitations moving forward, and then recap of the budget priorities that we set in February. And then, of course, final discussion. Anytime during this presentation, if you have any questions, stop and ask. And if I don't know the answer, I've got a whole lot of people in the room that probably do. So they're hiding out now.
We can see him.
So in the comprehensive plan, there were 3 areas of guidance. There was plans or studies, projects, and regulatory perspectives. And each one of these areas has specific things for us to be looking at. Plan or study was an area that we needed to get more information on areas of interest that the citizens had. One of those related to streets and understanding how our streets are working and how we're going to address the streets issues throughout the city. If any of you are interested, you can look in your plan that we handed out. You don't have it with you, but when you get home, or if you do, go to the back of it. And it will talk about the various plans and when we plan to work on them. So streets were a portion of the comprehensive plan, and that was one of the top issues that council wanted to address. Another thing that was in the comprehensive plan was the fiber to the home project. Again, something that council has listened to the citizens and is moving forward. And then there's various other things that have come up in our discussions that we'll go through. I just want to bring up the comprehensive plan in this conversation because it's an important planning tool for council and for the city to understand what is it that the people of Fort Morgan want with their input to that plan. So, no questions yet. I can do a really good hand presentation on the board, so if this gets really boring, it's a lot more entertaining to watch me draw circles and arrows, and it is. So we can go to that if we need to. So our budget capabilities and limitations. This is really important to understand. We currently have approximately $40 million in reserves, which is a very healthy reserve for a community our size. What people don't understand is that those reserves are set aside for specific purposes. For example, bonding. If we want to go out and get a bond to pay for something in one of the enterprises, we have to have reserves, and there's a reserve requirement for some of the bonds that we currently have outstanding. That means you have to have at least 1 year's plus 10% or 20% in reserve so you can pay your bonds if for whatever reason you can't make a payment. You get no revenue in 1 year, so you have to have reserves. So those are legally required and necessary for us to get bonds. The second thing is we have a lot of assets that are very expensive to replace. We've made the decision, when I say we, the city council in the past has made decisions that we will have cash on hand to purchase these expensive things. So for example, let's say a transformer blows up in a substation. They're not cheap. I think they're probably about between $1 million and $2 million a piece. And you really can't do without one of those and run an electric system. So we have about $14 million in reserves. Of those reserves, and if I'm wrong, you can tell me, somewhere between $10 and $14 million in reserves for the electric fund. Another thing that we found out in the flood is that our insurance carrier will no longer carry insurance for poles. Now they'll cover the wire and they'll cover the transformers and they'll cover, the labor to put those back on, but they won't cover the poles themselves. And so if a tornado comes through town, knocks down a lot of poles, we got to replace those, and they aren't cheap either. Depending on how tall they are, I think the cheapest pole we probably buy is about $200, and it's a short one. The rest of them are between $500 and $900 a piece. So they aren't cheap. And those are the wooden poles, and the steel poles cost a little bit more. So we talk about reserves, and a lot of people hear reserves and they say, hey, we got all this money, why don't you spend it? Because we can't necessarily spend it all. There's certain things in reserves that we can go in and use, and those are generally found in the general fund. And so those are things that you want to keep into consideration when we start moving forward with a lot of different projects and ideas. Where will the money come from? How will we get it? Now, we have revenues every year that come in, and we spend those revenues. They don't go into reserves. So I want to talk a little bit about the restrictions on those revenues. When people see our budget, and there's our total budget for 2017, $59,763,781. That's a lot of money. That is equivalent or more than what Commerce City's budget is. Our budget is significantly high. Of that $59 million, approximately $21 to $22 million is wholesale electric purchases so we can keep the lights on. That's a big part of what our budget is. The money that we really can focus on, and I'm going to focus on streets as we move forward here in just a minute, the general fund has $10,831,000. That is derived primarily from sales tax, fees in the general fund, property tax, and capital improvement fund comes primarily from HUTF, which is gas tax money that's sent to us, and then also it is 1% sales tax that comes just for the specific purpose of capital improvement projects. So, I was going to bring marbles today, but I wasn't sure how I was going to keep them all contained. So Nelson helped me make marbles and put them on the screen. So imagine our budget is about 60 marbles. That's what we have to spend on an annual basis. So that's the revenue that comes in, the expenditures that go out. Trust and enterprise funds restrictions. Of those 60 marbles, all but 13 are restricted on what they can be used for as it relates to general government purposes. So under Tabor, everyone's favorite amendment to the Constitution, we can only use enterprise funds, which are supported by fees and rates, for the purpose of that enterprise, similar to a private company. If we collect rates for electric, those rates generally have to stay in the electric fund or for a purpose related to the general or to the electric fund. If we collect gas revenue from the gas department, fees and rates are established based upon what it costs to provide that specific service. These funds cannot be used on what is considered traditional government purposes, such, for example, police, public safety, fire. Those are traditional government services. Streets, parks and rec, museum, library, quality of life things often fall under your traditional government purposes and are supported by taxes. Administration, those things fall under there. So under Tabor, a government taxing fund, which is the general fund, and the capital improvement fund of the general fund, cannot provide revenue to an enterprise beyond 9.9% of its annual revenue. So there's a restriction that money go from a general taxing fund to an enterprise fund, and there's also restrictions that it go the other way. The restrictions are a little bit different coming from an enterprise to the general fund, but it's all based upon business principles and how that money is transferred over. For example, payment in lieu of taxes is something that comes out of the enterprise into the general fund and supports a large portion of that $10 million. In fact, payment in lieu of taxes makes up approximately a third of what the general fund is. So the utilities are actually paying for the general fund to be supported. And in the past, when we've had significant water debt, the general fund has actually gone out and done water purchases for the water fund, not exceeding what the 9.9% of the annual revenue was. Funds collected for enterprises and trust funds are to be used for that purpose. For example, under the perpetual care fund. That's a fun one that we spend very little time on in the budget. It's one of those funds that, you know, we don't like to think a lot about because it's for the cemetery. We can't pull money out of that trust fund and use it on streets. We can't use it on parks. It has to sit there and it has to be used for those purposes, similar to the enterprises. So when we look at this big piece of pie that we have in the budget of $60 million, we've got 60 marbles. Of those marbles, we have approximately 13 that can be used on streets. And right now, while we're working on the stormwater fund, until that becomes an enterprise, you know, you've got 13 marbles to spend on that, and that includes everything else. So the capital improvement fund, this is what makes up the capital improvement fund. I'm going to start talking a little more specific about streets, but this can apply to any of those traditional government services that we provide in the city. Street paving is budgeted at $750,000. Everything else, which is kind of listed up there, falls under the rest of the pie. So every year we budget about $750,000 out of the capital fund for road improvements. The reason why I'm focusing on road improvements is because it is the #1 priority for council on general fund expenditures. Fiber optic is under the electric fund because it is an enterprise type of a utility and doesn't fall under our general government category. So we've got funding in the electric fund that we're focused on that. So streets falls under the general fund. So out of our $3 million, We have 3 marbles for capital improvement funds, so our screens significantly shrink up there. The capital improvement fund for, marble analysis for streets is we have just a little bit less than a marble to play with when it comes to streets in the capital fund. So, the general fund. Now, this is a pie that is completely separated by a lot of different areas. Now, if you look over here, it's not going to pop up. That is our streets allocation for the general fund. It's about $1.4 million. On the left-hand side, which you can't see very well because it's so small, are the individual things that $1.4 million is spent on. When we think about $1.4 million and $750,000, we think, hey, we've got 2 marbles to play with here. But in actuality, when you look at the breakdown of all those things, it takes more than just building a street and putting down pavement to run the streets department. And, about $470,000 of that is labor and having our employees there to plow the streets, to sand the streets, to pothole and patch and crack seal and all the other maintenance requirements that go into that. And then the materials that go along with that. We budget about $150,000 a year for curb and gutter improvements, and we use those in street projects. So that $750,000 that you see goes usually for the black stuff, and the $150,000 is usually fixing the sides of the streets, the curbs and gutters as we go along. So we have 10 marbles that we get to play with in the general fund. Now, this will all come together in just a minute, but when you look at the general fund marble analysis, we have 10 marbles to cover all of those other things. Mayor and city council is a very, very important department, and we use marbles to pay you guys. I'm pretty sure you think, that's what the pay is for city council marbles. But can't eat them. You got all the other departments that go along in the general fund that we pull that money from. So the general fund marble analysis for streets maintenance is really 1 marble. You got $1.4 million, and that covers all those different things that are in that list and what we have to get done. So we have approximately 2 marbles right now to do the capital and maintenance on the streets. So the streets recovery analysis plan, I'm not sure what that word is that guy's saying, but they blocked it out, so I imagine he's not too happy. And I've had some people approach me in public places and say those kinds of words when they explain their frustration about some of our streets. And I don't know if you've had the same experience, but I have. And it's sometimes uncomfortable. But in 2016, the city conducted an in-depth study, and it said that of our 52 miles of streets, we are behind about $26 million. That's a lot of money. That's, almost 57% of a rec center. So, we've got a lot of money tied up in streets, and we're behind quite a bit. Now, any questions about that? Because I've had people say, well, why are we behind that much? And the answer is that the cost for streets has gone up significantly. The amount of money that we have been able to get to pay for streets has not gone up in the same proportion as what the cost of streets has gone up over the last 20 years. In 2007, I think we were budgeting about $350,000 a year. Since then, 2008 and forward, we've budgeted more like $750,000, and in some years we pulled out of reserves and put as much as $3.5 million into the streets budget for capital improvements. Downtown was a really good project we talked about. So the cost of streets is going up, and our revenues have not gone up in the same proportion as the cost of streets, and we haven't been focused on those. So how many marbles do we need? We need 3 marbles. That's the number. And to return the streets to the conditions that of the industry standard, we need 3 marbles for 15 years. After that, we need at least 2 marbles to maintain the standard. So if you think about how are we going to catch up, we look at either moving or getting additional marbles. So the question is, how do we approach getting the marbles we need for the streets that our citizens want and deserve?
Are those general fund marbles?
Those are general fund marbles, yeah. So if you look at those 3 marbles that we need, they've got to come from somewhere, and they generally have to, well, they can only come out of the general fund. So option 1, status quo. That's 1 marble. We're spending 1 marble right now. Option 2 is sales tax, seek a sales tax increase. We looked at different options, what it would take to get 2 more marbles to augment what we currently have. So we have 3 marbles, is a 1% sales tax increase. And then you can also take from the current budget, which is the rob Peter to pay Paul option, and we can definitely look at that. So that would also get us 3 marbles. Any questions about that? Oh, there's questions. Yes.
Yeah, this may be a little premature.
Oh, no,
For this
please.
question, but they've been talking about increasing sales tax at the state level.
Yes.
How would that affect us?
Well,
Were that to pass?
It doesn't really affect us a lot. The state sales tax, the way that they've got it set up, there are a lot of issues with it that we're concerned about. Now, a lot of people know we've got to fix the roads and the bridges and everything all over the state. So we've got to do something. What it does for the city of Fort Morgan is it doubles what our HUTF funds are. So we get $350,000 in HUTF. That's part of that marble that we have in capital improvement. So approximately half of our funds come from there. They would double that. And it's not just a doubling, it's a double so long as you have matching funds to double. So we would have to put in $350,000 to get another $350,000 out. So there's strings attached to it right now. I know it's still going through the legislature, and they're trying to work through those things. I know that the Senate has a different plan than the House, and they're trying to make this thing work. But it garners us an additional $350,000 or potentially another, $350,000. As you can tell, that's 10% of what we need, because we need 3 marbles. We need $3 million, and $300,000 isn't going to get us very far. The other thing that, if you look at the numbers that have been provided by the state, the counties also get a portion of that money. And what will happen, I'm not saying it will happen, I'm saying what could happen, let's say what could happen, is that when the money from the state for county roads goes up, the county can always readjust their mill levy to the road and bridge fund, which provides us money for streets. And we've seen where they've moved those mill levies around, and it takes money away from the communities. It took away from Brush, City of Fort Morgan, Wiggins. We get a certain percentage of that money that is taxed the citizens in Fort Morgan. If they take the money out of the road and bridge, when I say money, they take a mill levy and say we're going to take some of the mill levy out of road and bridge and put it into their general fund, then they go spend it on something else in the county, but not on roads, which would come to us to address the streets. So if they're getting money from another source, the state, they can lower essentially what the city gets. We may end up in a net zero situation based upon how this all works out with the road and bridge issue. So when you ask what do we get out of it, it's uncertain right now. We don't know exactly what we're going to get. They can give us some numbers, but they haven't looked at the big picture of what the city of Fort Morgan will garner from this. You know, last year CML tried to run a bill it was opposed by the counties to put representation from municipalities or have some sort of representation in the process of determining mill levy for road and bridge. Counties hated it. They didn't want it. You know, I guess this is a little side note. Counties needed to be involved with urban renewal when taxing districts were being made by municipalities. They needed representation on that. So CML was nice enough to, I think they opposed it, but ultimately it went through, and so now they have representation in the taxing aspect of a development district for a municipality, but they don't want it to go the other way where we have any say in the road and bridge. So it's kind of an interesting situation. We're going to probably net we could net nothing out of this whole thing when it's all said and done, and we're not any further ahead with the state tax on a local level. They have said that they're trying to put together, if this does pass, they have projects out here that they're going to focus on. Exit 80 would be one that would get moved up. So we would see a benefit on the interstates, maybe on some of the state highways, but overall, we're not going to see anything for our 52 miles and $26 million outstanding issue.
No marbles.
What's that?
No marbles.
No marbles. And if we do get a marble, it's only going to be a third. So that's kind of an interesting.
Well, the thing that I thought about when I heard about that is that if on the ballot there is a state increase in income tax, I think option 2 gets a little shakier for us as far as people go, and geez, I'm getting hit from several different directions.
You're right, and I think that's definitely something we need to take into consideration. Is this the right time to be asking the citizens for this money if the state's going to ask?
But one could pass. On the positive side, the state one may fail, and a local one may pass. I mean, that would be, depending upon, because it's more than just us, obviously, voting on the state one. So you may have a lot of other communities that vote down a, statewide tax, so.
Right, and really what we would do is we would follow the Tabor requirements and guidelines, and we would ask the citizens what they think. But I agree that it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell to go out and ask for more money when you've got the state coming back and asking for sales tax. And I know that not all of the communities in Colorado agree with the state sales tax. Most of them are rural. I know that there is some support from rural Colorado because there are a lot of state highways out in rural Colorado. But, the concern by municipalities that I've heard, I know CML is supporting the state initiative, but some of the communities that I've talked to are mostly concerned because sales tax is really a local tax. That's how local governments get their funding. The state has all kinds of other taxes that they can assess that we can't. For example, we don't have an income tax in Fort Morgan. We're not allowed to do an income tax. There's several other taxing mechanisms that the state has that the city of Fort Morgan and all the other municipalities don't have. And I think that's the real concern on a local city level is, the state's really inching their way into what local revenues have always been based upon. Now, when you look at that 1% increase, if you drive down to Brighton and shop, and we had a presentation on leakage, a lot of people go to Brighton and shop, a lot of people go to Greeley and shop. When you shop there, you're paying for their roads, you're paying for their improvements. The TIF fee for Eagles, whatever it is, Crossing, or I can't remember, the cool Eagle out there. It's like 10.2%. I mean, it's not cheap to shop there when it comes to taxes. Our tax rate right now is 5.9%, 3% goes to the city, 2.9% goes to the state. You add 1% on there, we're still cheaper than driving to Brighton and shopping, and cheaper than going to Loveland to shop. The sales tax here is still significantly low. So it is a hard sell because nobody likes to pay. So discussion on the three options, I guess I should have put this up. Doing the same we have done will provide the same result, and I don't think people are happy with the status quo because we've heard back from them and they say it's not working. Nobody likes new taxes unless they know what they're going to get for their money, and that's how do we help citizens know what they're going to get if they were to pass this tax. And then if there are not enough marbles for streets, then whose marbles do we take? And that is another option. Whose ox do we gore to make this work for everyone else? And now you're seeing all of the directors get a little bit nervous, when we start talking about playing with other people's marbles. They don't like that. So really quick to go over the budget priorities that we have set for 2018 to make sure that we're all in the same place is that but the broadband project is number one and it's moving forward. Streets development, that's your second most important one. That's what we need to move forward on. I want to talk about what those options are in just a minute. The NISP financing. I know I missed project, but it means, Northern Integrated Supply Project Financing. We will be bringing some updates to council on that. We're getting updated numbers all the time. We're meeting regularly for financing issues with the member communities, and that's going to heat up quite a bit in the next several months. In fact, right now, they're getting ready to adopt the budget for next year, and the discussion is, how aggressive do we get with design right now? So that's moving forward. City complex was in the top 5. That's not something that's going to be done in 2018. We have some, there are a lot of steps that we need to go through before we get there. So as I pointed out in the memo, what we plan to do with the city complex is to look for, or to budget for design, work on what is the design going to look like, what's it going to be, and then get engineering, go out for a grant and get engineering done and have it ready to build in the event that we want to move forward with that down the road. Homeless and housing initiatives was number 5 that we discussed, and I want to thank the chief and Josh. We've spent some time discussing how are we going to address the homeless issue in Fort Morgan, and you hear a lot of, and maybe you've heard a lot of the different things that I've heard as well. Some people get concerned because they say, well, how do we help the homeless without making it a homeless haven where all of a sudden everybody comes here? We want to help them, but we also don't have the resources to help everyone. The other part of that is, how do we protect public resources in situations so that everybody gets to use the resources that are paid for by the public, and not just a few go in and take over. Then there's also the humanitarian side, and we've been looking at all these different options of, these people that end up being homeless fall into a lot of different categories, and they have a lot of different needs. Some of them have, addiction issues, substance abuse issues. Some of them have mental illness issues, and they need that kind of support and help. Some of them they're down on their luck and lost their job and couldn't pay the rent and got evicted and weren't able to get another job. The resources for each homeless situation are a little bit different. And so what we're doing is working with local agencies to find a lead agency that can come in and work with the various resource providers and service providers, such as Centennial Mental Health, the Family Center, the Workforce Center, to try and tie these people into the right resources. Now, the city can't take lead on that. That's, we don't have the budget and the resources to say we're going to manage the situation, but we do have resources that we can lend to help that. And I know the chief has already got people to volunteer as, what's the official title?
Homeless liaison officers.
Homeless liaison officers, and these will be officers that get special training in communication, and then also they will work to help identify people and what their needs are, and then put them in touch with this other group that we're hoping will develop over time to get them to the resources that they need. And I think that we don't have the actual, exact bullet to fix that problem, but I think there are a lot of different services around the community that we can bring together, or that can be brought together to do that. So that's what we're going to work on and try and figure out in 2018, how do we get something in the budget to support that kind of an initiative. I'll get back to streets in just a second, but in the 5 to 10 year plan, a couple really important things: stormwater and recreation center. Recreation center was a really important discussion item at our retreat, and there's a lot of work to get done to move that forward, and we want to make sure that we are meeting council's expectations. This isn't going to be a 2018 completion kind of a project, but it's something that we need to start working towards. So what we're proposing is that we would phase this project over multiple years, and we would involve potential funding from various grant resources wherever we can. I know that there's some private foundations that are interested in getting involved potentially with the process and providing some money for that process. We'll work with the public to develop a concept plan. What is it going to look like? What is it going to be? We're going to have to look at what is it going to cost to put this together. So we've got some work ahead of us. I know there's some other ideas, and this actually is in the comprehensive plan, is to look at and determine whether or not a recreation district would be the way to provide this kind of a service, and how would the city support putting together that kind of a district. So that may be another thing that we insert into our work program for 2018, is start looking at what is it going to take to put together a recreation district. You know, a lot of people in the county, right by Fort Morgan, are very in favor of having this kind of amenity. I think there are a lot of people in their community that want this kind of amenity. We know that it's failed twice when it's gone out to the voters, and I think, you know, involving a recreation district that gets everybody who gets to play at the playground may garner the votes necessary to make it happen. And so we're going to look at all those different options and bring those back to council as we go through, and we'll probably be looking for some direction on that from council on how we do that. Stormwater Enterprise, as you know, we're wrapping that up, trying to get that pushed forward, and those projects will be planned for 2018 once we understand what the revenue is going to be, and what projects that we can focus on and take care of. If you look down, CDOT did help us a little bit, and I know Brad worked really hard on that. They put in a new pipe down into the river and under the ditch, and that was a pretty expensive part of the overall master plan project. So we're making progress in that area. Now, going back to streets.
Real quick.
Oh, yeah.
On the Field House and Rec Center, I was approached by a group who said that they were interested or wondered where we were at as far as doing a rec center and everything. And their interest was a rec center that also would have the indoor pools, so that we'd have year-round swimming and available swimming competition, but said that they would potentially be willing to donate up to $1 million towards the project. But it's with that, at least with talking with just this one person, it sounded like we needed it more on the front burner than the back burner. And so I don't know if that's extra incentive for us as far as evaluating it or not. But
And I think this is definitely on the front burner, because I think council said it needs to get done. And so what we're planning to do, and I'm glad that you brought that up, what we're planning to do is start that public vetting process. What needs to be in this rec center? Does it need to have an ice skating rink for Brent? Does it need to have?
Only if he gives us $1 million.
Okay, so Brent's not getting to skate. But I think one of the things that's going to make this successful, because we know we're going to have to go out to a vote, is to get the community involved and understand what they want. If part of that is we want an indoor pool, and that's what the community really wants, is an indoor pool, then we've got to sit down and figure out what's that cost, what's it going to be, where does that fit into the overall picture. There's other things that I know that have come up that may be able to work to the benefit of this, as well as I know that the various lodging firms in town would really like to see something that could host weddings, that could host conferences. And, you know, we've got some nice facilities at Country Stakeout, but it's limited. You can fit about 250 to 300 people in there. If you drive just a couple hours north to Gering, Nebraska, they have a really nice convention center that can hold up to, I think, 1,000 people, all full. And, you know, they run a really nice, it's not huge, it's not like the Denver Convention Center, but it's big enough that it would accommodate pretty much what we need in this area. And the hotels would really like to see something like that happen. So there might be an opportunity to combine some of these things and say, all right, we can have a field house that also works as a convention center or something like that. So we want to go to the public and get the ideas and see where we're going to get the most support and bring that back. But as far as the front burner, I think it is on the front burner at this point. We're planning on moving that forward and having that ready for that next step, and we'll flesh that out a little bit more and bring back something more than a skeleton. So, anyways, any other questions on Field House, Recreation Center? we'll start planning here. So discussion and questions. I have a couple of questions for you. On the streets, we have three options. Status quo, seek a 1% sales tax, or rob Peter to pay Paul. There's a process that we can go through to figure this out. We can look at the 1% sales tax. If you don't want to do the 1% sales tax this year, which is the recommendation that we have, is you can try. If it doesn't go, the people don't want to pay for it, then, you know, we've got to figure out some other way. Now, one of the things that's important to know, if we go out for a tax and it fails, it doesn't mean that the problem's gone away. We still have streets that need to be fixed. And so we need to start planning how are we going to come up with more marbles. If it's not going to be through a new tax, is it going to be through adjusting other things in the budget? You know, put things into perspective. If we were to eliminate the golf course, we'd lose about $175,000 in revenue, and we would save about $325,000 in a transfer. So we net, by closing that down, $325,000, which is a third of a marble. It only gets us about 10% of the way there. So that's to put things in perspective. If you wanted to cut out that amenity, I know I made made me nervous just saying that, because I really like golfing. You know, when you look at that pie for the general fund, if we went back to we go back to the capital improvement fund, we could take that entire fund, and that's what we need. The downside of that is we wouldn't be getting new police cars to replace the fleet. We wouldn't be getting new fire trucks anytime soon. We wouldn't be fixing up parks and recreation and library and all these things. So that's one option that we could look at. And I'm really not throwing out options on how we rob Peter tonight. That would be, if that's what you would like us to do, what we plan to do is sit down with several different ideas and options and things that we can do over time. The quick fix to the streets is passing a tax, a sales tax. We have not passed a new tax, or there's not been a new tax levied in the city of Fort Morgan since 1992. Why are we behind in streets improvements? Our tax base has not grown sufficiently fast enough, although we are really focused on it right now, and I think we're making a lot of headway with our economic development department. But historically, we have not seen the growth in the tax base equal to the costs associated with the general fund. That being said, if the citizens don't want that tax, it's understandable. And then we go, that doesn't mean the problem goes away. We've got to come up with another way to address it. Yeah.
So would that sales tax be dedicated solely for streets?
Yes. It would be a streets sales tax.
So
If you wanted it to be that way, I guess it could be whatever you want it to be, but that's kind of our proposal. Yeah. Sorry, Dan.
Is a hybrid an option? I think if we go to the voters and say, we cut every department 5-10% or whatever, this is what we're able to generate for the streets. We're doing everything that we can to cut government expenses, but it's just not going to be enough. That might go a little bit further with the voters.
Mm-hmm. We can look at that too. If that might be an option for. Look at what we cut and what, take it to the voters from that perspective. Be selling the tax in a way that we're going to cut in certain areas. Now, you have to look at, if you look at some of these departments, I'll show you. If you look at the general fund, some of these departments, if you cut 5% across the board out of every department, you might be significantly reducing that department. Like you might have a department of 1 or 2, and you say, okay, we're going to cut out 50% of your staff because we can't afford, pay that. It's not saying it's not an option. I'm just pointing out the aspect of it. 5% out of the police department, which is the biggest piece of the pie. Right now, we're running right at budget. We finally are full, thanks, Chief. And, there's other services that I know that they're looking at and want to provide. So we can do that, yeah. I don't think that that's a bad idea.
Well, just with government in general, people tend to have the perspective, whether it's accurate or not, they have the perspective that there's a lot of waste, that there's a lot of money spent on things that probably shouldn't be, and it would be a gesture that may edge some people on the fence in favor of passing an additional tax.
And we can definitely do that. One of the things that, as far as this process goes, we can sit down and come back with options to say, okay, we would cut, if we were going to cut, this is what we would cut for streets. We could cut it this way, we could cut it this way, or we could cut it this way. We'd like to come back with several options for council to say, here's what we think would not have the greatest impact on the services that we're providing now. So I think that's what we want to do. If we're going to cut, make sure we're not impacting seriously other important services.
Well, and it's a tough situation to be in, because ultimately, when you boil down, in my perspective, when you boil down a city, what we're responsible for providing are basics: streets, water, all of our utilities, protection, fire and police. Then you add on the nice to haves. Not that we don't, and I love all the nice to haves, but you have things like the rec, you have things like the parks. And so that's where I think Jeff was getting into, where you can't really take certain percentages away. And I think that might be one of the things we look at is, streets versus quality of life. I think to me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, we have to have streets that people can drive on, It's just, I think I look at it and I don't know how we could not look at a sales tax. Tying it down, you improve road qualities, you improve opportunities for more economic development, which raises more sales tax. I think it's kind of a rolling marble, staying with the marble theory. It's a rolling marble theory that by investing in the streets, I think we're investing in, the overall community, which should produce more sales tax revenue.
And I guess my biggest thing is that it's not just citizens paying for sales tax. It can be other people that come here. I mean, the map showed the other day, 39,000 people come to Fort Morgan to shop. I mean, they're all paying that tax. It's not just the citizens. But anytime if we're going to start talking cutting, we got to be very careful with that. I don't think we want to cut and cause our quality of life to go down. I mean, we need to be adding to that. And so if we're talking cutting, I don't want to do that. I want to keep things and keep improving things. And if I get streets are important, but I'm not in favor of cutting staff or cutting anything for the city.
Oh, and by no means am I suggesting we cut. I'm thinking, but if we decide that we have to make a hybrid, then you have to look at, basic bare necessities for life versus some of the quality of life things. But no, I am more in favor of going out for a sales tax increase.
Absolutely.
So we can do what we need to do. I don't want to see us touch our departments if we don't have to.
Well, and one other thing real quick along those lines is if you cut amenities that we're talking about or labeling as quality of life here and everything, then I think that you tend to, and I'm sure Josh should be able to tell us more, reduce your ability to attract new business and to attract growth and everything, because I think they're looking at that for their employees and everything. And so then all of a sudden you're undercutting yourself when you're saying, well, we're going to increase our tax base because we're working on economic growth. Then that ends up being a backslide from that standpoint too.
I think what Dan says resonates well with the taxpayers, and I think this is where you pay staff to think outside the box. Because what I'm hearing is a lot of different messages, which I think makes sense. We don't want to cut what we currently have. We don't want to lose what we are currently making headway on. That makes perfect sense. We also don't want to go to the taxpayers who may have the perception that it's just wasted money because they don't take care of what they currently have. That could be a perception. Sometimes people have a bad experience with the city for whatever reason, and they just assume that the whole city is not being run appropriately, which I can guarantee that it's being run very efficiently and very effective comparatively throughout the state. We do an excellent job. But that doesn't mean that we can't do some things that might convince them to understand that we are spending their money appropriately and that we are spending it on and efficiently, and we're leveraging grants wherever we can. I think there's some things that we can do. So I think the message that I'm getting from Councilman Marlar is that, we've got to look at the concerns of the taxpayers and address them. At the same time, help them understand that if you rob from the wrong Peter to pay Paul, you lose the rock, and then what do you do? So, you got to figure out how to balance those things. And I think that's where we have to be creative as staff and come back and say, that this is the innovation part of the culture that we have in Fort Morgan. If council says, figure out how to come up with more marbles without, if we go out for a tax and it fails, it doesn't matter. We still have to come up with more marbles. We don't have the option of saying we aren't going to do anything with the streets. There are communities that have not done this, and they've gone back and they've decided instead of fixing the streets, they grind them up and just leave road base on top and turn them back to dirt. Solves the drainage problem because all the water soaks into the ground, but then you have muddy ruts and, it's a mess. Another thing to think about, and some of the ideas, and again, going back to innovation, we had some really interesting ideas that came out just out of the blue in this discussion. We heard from the experts that a semi-truck, fully loaded semi-truck, is like 2,700 cars driving down the street. How many semi-trucks drive through town?
Too many.
It's a lot. And is there some way to address that? Do we have overloaded trucks that are overloaded and they're tearing up the streets because they aren't loaded the way that they're supposed to? Do we start a special enforcement campaign and make sure that people, that trucks driving on the streets aren't overloaded? Or they pay for if you want to drive overloaded on the state highway, you get a permit, you pay $25. There's a fee to overload your truck. We don't collect that. We don't look at that. So they may get a fee from the state to drive on the state highway, and the state collects that money, never gives anything to us, but they're also driving on our streets. So thinking outside of the box, there's ways to look at additional revenues or different revenues or savings, and I really think if we can come back with some ideas that show savings that we can do to bring that money back in for streets, I think that goes a long way as well. So I guess the question is, do you want to go out for a tax? And if so, what we would do is come back to council and say, here's how we propose to do it, probably in the next couple of weeks. Say, if we're going out for tax, here's how we propose to do it. I know there's some legal issues, and Jason's working on those to make sure that we don't violate the Fair Campaign Practices Act. That's a big deal, and we got to make sure that we follow that. But we would come back with a plan to say, here's how we would promote it. The second thing is if you decide you don't want to go out for tax, that's fine. We will focus all of our efforts on Peter and see what we can't do to scrape a little bit off of his hide and come up with some savings and some other things. If you want the hybrid, where we come back and say, we're going to go out for a tax, and to demonstrate to the taxpayers that we, spend their money well, we go through a list of things and say, here's what we're doing well, this is how we're saving money, but then also come up with some innovative ideas on how we can maybe collect money in different ways. So I don't know if I've understood you correctly, all I need to know is, do you want us to look at a tax or not and bring that back as an option? And if I've understood you correctly, you definitely want us to look at what kind of savings we can do without cutting major programs that are important to the community.
Yeah, I think Dan hit on a good point. I mean, there's areas without cutting that you can cinch the belt. I mean, do you really need this? It's the same as household budget. At this point in time, you need to just cinch the belt a little bit and look at the sales tax. I think the timing right now for the sales tax is going to be kind of a downfall or a deficit for us, but people aren't going to know if the state's going to pass and ours is going to pass at that point, so, I mean, the chance or out of it being defeated, both of them.
And, you know, the interesting thing is that even if the state and the city sales tax both passed, we'd still be cheaper than
Yes, far cheaper.
Sure.
Brighton and some of the Greeley shopping areas. So I think that is an option. But tightening the belt is always something we want to look at as well, without major impacts. I mean, you can tighten the belt only so far, and then you cut off half the body, and what's the point of the belt in the first place?
I think regardless, it can't be done without a tax increase. I know the city is efficient, you know, only being through 1 year of budget process and doing the approvals. It appears to me and everything that I see that the city is very effective and very efficient with the money that it has, and there isn't a lot of waste. So if we go for a tax, which I think is necessary, and it doesn't pass, I don't know how we're going to fix the streets. Honestly, I don't think that it can be done without a tax. I'm just worried that the perspective out there and wondering about mitigating that. So I'm in favor of putting out for a tax.
Okay.
I would agree. I would be in favor. And I think it's key, though, that we earmark it so that this percentage of this tax is dedicated, whether it's for some, if we think it's like the 15 years, if that's what they're talking about. So for this block period of time, this money is earmarked specifically for streets. I think that will curb a little bit of the concern maybe about waste, that we're not taking the sales tax revenue and then doing something that the
Right.
taxpayers don't want.
And I think that's a lot of communities that are successful in these have sundown clauses that say, you know, it's good for 15 years and then it goes away, or, you know, and that's one of the things that I really believe, that if people know what their taxes are being spent on and they agree with it, that they will pass it and they'll go for it. One of the things that's important for the public and council to understand is that once you start collecting that revenue, we'll want to have a plan in place, because as soon as people pass the tax in November, they'll want
They wanna
streets
see
done in
results.
December.
They want to see results.
They
We
want
don't
to see
have the
results.
marbles yet.
And so,
They'll be rolling in.
yeah, so that's where we'll want to, if it passes, we're going to probably want to adjust our budget, because we'll pass our budget potentially before the election. And if it passes, we may want to have a secondary budget to say, if it passes, this is what we're going to do. If it doesn't pass, this is what we're going to do.
So do we, with that analogy, do we budget assuming the worst?
Well, we would budget two ways. We budget as though we have the money that we have now.
Right.
And cinch up where we can cinch up. And then we would budget as though the money was going to come in. And so if we did get it passed, we would look at what the revenue earnings would be by the middle of the year and start planning accordingly to do those projects.
Does that mean 2 presentations for each department?
No.
Oh.
No. Because what we'll do is we'll do the cinching before. So what we'll bring to council is cinched up budgets where we can cinch, and we'll start working on that now. And that's why this presentation right now is so important in understanding what your priorities are and how you want to go about them, because it will take us a lot of time and effort to work on the budget to come back with some, results that council's going to be looking for. So I appreciate the direction. So if I've understood you correctly, make sure you put this in the minutes, John, because, forgot my pen. Oh, it's right up there. If I've understood you correctly, what we want to do is go back and look at some innovative ideas, think outside the box. How can we save money? What are some things that we can do to pinch those pennies a little bit more that we currently have? Roll those marbles a little bit further, however we want to use it. We don't want to cut out of programs that are important to the community. We don't want to send a signal out there that our quality of life is somehow deteriorating and going away. And at the same time, prepare a tax and how we would approach a tax. And so we will bring a lean budget and looking how we can add more to streets, and then also look at what happens if we do pass the tax. Does that
Yes.
sound
Yep.
reasonable?
Hopefully,
Sounds
that's
good.
someplace that maybe the Innovation Committee or whatever might also be, another source with that and everything, too.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one of the things we can start out with them is what are some things that we can do to cinch the belt a little bit? Very good. That's all I have unless you have any other questions. I appreciate your feedback and direction and your thoughts tonight. This isn't an easy thing to work on, but that's why we start early.
If I could, for the record, as far as the Fair Campaign Practices Act, we haven't taken any official action to refer this to the ballot at this time. That would be done by resolution at a later date upon all that language being prepared, et cetera.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next, we have our consent agenda. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight's consent agenda includes item A, approval of the disbursements and payroll for March, and item B, approval of minutes for the April 4th, 2017 City Council regular meeting. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business by the council and will be enacted with a single motion and a single vote by roll call. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is deemed necessary, that item should be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately.
I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution approving the disbursement at the payroll for March and approval of the minutes from the April 4th, 2017 regular City Council meeting.
Second.
A resolution by Christine Costello, and a second by Allison Howe, both by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next, we have public comment and audience participation for items not on the agenda.
I apologize. I was number 3 on the agenda, and I got my car and discovered I had a flat tire.
Oh, no.
So
Does she have to
I had
sign
to
in?
call and get it. But my name is Geraldine Hall, and I'm the regent of
Ms.
the
Hall,
Fort
would you
Morgan
mind
chapter.
signing in?
Pardon?
There's a little sheet right next to the podium, if you wouldn't mind
Under the
just
mouse,
putting
yep.
your name on that.
Is there a pen up there?
Yes. Oh, that's a marker. Here.
Oh, okay, I'll start over.
Hello.
My name is Geraldine Hall, and I'm the regent of the Fort Morgan chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And this society is an organization based on promoting patriotism and historical preservation. And we are proud to request that the Fort Morgan City Council name the small park next to the skate park, commonly known as State Street Park or Old Fort Park. We would like it renamed the Kate Baker Clatworthy NSDAR Park in honor of our first regent and an outstanding member and citizen of the Fort Morgan. And Clatworthy name is certainly a familiar name in Morgan County. The Fort Morgan chapter of NSDAR is one of the oldest chapters in the state. It was organized and chartered in 1909 when Mrs. Clatworthy served in the highest position that a local chapter has. There is a DAR monument already in the park for which we are responsible for cleaning and upkeep. We hope to add 2 benches to make this park, which will provide a peaceful resting place for those walking by. Although it is not on the actual site of the old fort, this small piece of ground is very close to the entrance of our fort. We feel that this adds high historic value to Fort Morgan. So I thank you for your time and your consideration of this request. Thank you.
You've already taken care of that, and it was passed and authorized for you. Mr. Brennan took good care of you. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes.
How do we decide when spring cleanup is as far as for the city? Because this is just completely personal as a private citizen, but about the time when I'm starting to clean up and get ready for spring and I go, how long did it last? It's already gone. So I think it comes too early in the year.
And I'll have Brad talk a little bit about that. I know that's one of the issues that we want to figure out how to be more efficient and be innovative to fix that problem, because, you know, it really doesn't look good. And then it also isn't convenient if it's too late or too early in the season, so.
Yeah, it's traditionally been the last week of March. It's been set that way. As Jeff mentioned, we're open to any other ideas that you may have. As you're aware, it ended on April 2nd. Our staff is working very hard. It's a lot of alleys, and it seems like over the years, we feel people are just saving their stuff until that event, and we're getting more and more to clean up. But yeah, we can always look at it. I think a couple years ago, if you recall, even where we were at, we got hit with snow, a lot of snow, and so we had spring cleanup under piles of snow and ice too. So it's kind of a hit and miss. We don't want to go too late for the streets department because they do crack sealing. So when we talk about streets, they could be doing that because the weather's great right now, but we're spending our time cleaning up alleys with dump trucks and things. So if we get too far in there, it takes away from the street maintenance efforts. Usually when it's cooler, they haven't started that yet, so.
And it's good, I think last time we reminded people that it isn't near as expensive as people think it is to schedule a special pickup. And so, you know, I would encourage people to take that under consideration. If they're not sure how much it costs, get a hold of our sanitation department.
Yep.
But we can do spring cleanup type stuff year round,
Yep.
you know, for members, and I thought it was crazy inexpensive.
Yeah, very
Definitely.
minimal fee to make a phone call and get it out of your yard, out of the eyesight. Everybody else has to look at it for a
Yep.
year.
Yeah, and we're working on it. We get calls because they see the sanitation trucks driving by. And again, those grabbers aren't intended to grab mattress and those kind of things. So that's where it seems like we're ignoring it. But our streets department, they're fully staffed with the dump trucks and all their staff trying to pick up those bigger items. We're finding TVs in piles of grass. Them trying to get rid of things that weren't on the list of approved items. So we have to go wade through what they're dumping as well as people are trying to sneak those items in as well. So
And we're past time to add to the piles if you have.
absolutely. And our code enforcement does a great job. Once we get done with an alley, they're notified that anything else that's left outside the dumpsters is a code issue. So we keep close tabs on that as well as best as we can. So.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Brad. Any other questions? That's a good question, and one of the things we're trying to figure out is how to make that efficient and quick and at the right time of the year. Maybe, you know, I know in Greeley, they do a cleanup and they have a central location, and people show up, and it's $5, and they can dump off whatever they can fit in their car or their truck. Some people bring trailers, and then they sort out the refrigerators, they sort out the appliances, they sort out the TVs, they sort out the chemicals we don't want going into the landfill, and they get the green stuff that can be turned into mulch, not that green stuff, that can turn into mulch, and then, you know, it's all in one place. People drive through, they drop it off, they go, you do it a couple weekends, a couple Saturdays, and you can spread it out, get those people who are ready early and those who want to do a little bit later. So we're thinking of doing something different. We haven't decided what that is. So that's a really good point. Do you want more? I think are we on reports?
We are now.
Oh, perfect. Want to thank the Finance Department. They're wrapping up the audit. We'll be bringing that back, I think, in 1st of June will be the report. They're on schedule with that. The audit's coming out really well. I want to thank them for all their hard work in getting that done. Jeannie leading the way on that. The year-to-date expenses are under revenues. That's always a really good thing. So our budget for 2017 is working out the way that we thought it would. You had the update on the fiber earlier. Really excited about that, and that's going to be huge for us. I know the police department's staying busy with all kinds of fun things. You probably see a lot of things in the paper about what they're doing. I want to thank the chief for doing that. And one of the things, as it relates to the budget, I want to really thank our managers. We've really turned over a lot of responsibility in the past several years with new software for managers to monitor their individual budgets. They've learned how to monitor those and manage those, and they've always done a really good job, but they've taken a more active role in monitoring and what's going on, and they do a really good job. So, you know, I really appreciate the fact that we need to be thoughtful about the public's perception of how we spend money. I want to thank our managers for being very ethical, honest, and doing what council wants them to do with that money. We make sure that it goes to benefit the citizens. So did anybody else have anything else to add? Yeah, Brent.
I just wanted to let everybody know, it's been in the paper, but we did kick off our water projects today. We had Cove Lane completely tore up and closed down for part of the day. So residents will receive notice from the water department, and the contractors, they move through their neighborhood to do line replacements. They're given water to get them through the day while we have them shut off and everything. But we've started that process, so we'll be doing that for several more weeks to come, and we'll try to stay ahead of all the public notification. So everybody found a few minor little gas leaks today and fixed those while we had the road tore up, and so guys are definitely busy. So thank you.
And the plat last week was not us, correct? Where they tore up plat right by 7-Eleven?
Oh, CDOT replaced that panel.
Or the 34 Barlow project.
Good.
Yep, not us, but
I had constituents asking what we were doing, and I could not answer that. But it's done, so it's good.
You will. Go ahead and ask the question. That's what we're here for.
You tell us about Barlow Road?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. I apologize. I've missed the last couple meetings, and you've probably been out there not knowing what's going on. It kicked back off on Monday, and so south side of 34 to Barlow is closed for about a month. Had our first construction meeting this morning, and if this weather holds out, they should be doing a lot of concrete work and that kind of stuff. So still a lot to be done on the project, and then a lot of restriping and resignalizing, but they're up and going again. And then to your mention, they were a little bit under budget, so that was a hump that I think even the prior mayor always asked about, the speed hump on 34, so they were able to go in and get that taken care of as part of this project. So.
People were just surprised.
Yeah, we were too when they just showed up, so
You're
we
right,
had those
and
conversations
Didn't
with.
take them long either. I
Yep.
mean, they were there, put cones up, and then they had a big hole.
Yep,
It's like,
yep.
wow,
Yeah, there wasn't much notification, and I apologize for that, so.
not your fault.
Thank you.
That answers your question.
See you in 2 weeks.
Next meeting is an announcement.
Okay, under bids, we are accepting sealed bids for pole-mounted transformers until 2:45 PM on April 19th, pad-mounted transformers until 2:45 PM on April 19th, upfitting of 2 police patrol vehicles until 3 PM on April 27th, library shelving until 4 PM on April 28th, MCO 3-yard trash containers until 2:30 PM on May 2nd, accepting bids for surplus city property consisting of 3 seized vehicles until May 3rd at 3 PM, 2017 concession operations until 4 PM on May 3rd, and sealed proposals for chlorine scrubber replacement until 3 PM on May 24th. Under meetings, the Heritage Foundation will meet on April 27th at 4 PM, and the next City Council regular meeting will be May 2nd at 6 PM here at City Hall. Just a couple of quick announcements. City will be doing an Arbor Day celebration in conjunction with the school district this Friday, the 21st, at 2:30 PM at the high school. The high school's horticulture class will help plant a couple of trees. Police Department is doing a National Drug Take-Back event on Saturday, April 29th at the Colorado Plains Medical Center parking lot from 10 to 2. And the Police Department is also going to host a Best Practices Conference on April 28th, inviting several similar-sized departments from around the region to share ideas and best practices.
With that, this meeting's adjourned.